Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight for our Foothill Expressway project. We're gonna give it maybe one more minute so folks can file in to our virtual public space, and we will get started shortly thereafter. All right. I'm sure folks will continue to join us, but we may as well get started. We'll jump right in. I do want folks to know that this meeting is being recorded. So without further ado, I would like to ask Ben to open us up, who's the project manager for the Foothill Expressway Multimodal Feasibility Study. Ben.
Oh, I was on mute. Good evening, everybody. So my name is Ben Agenyehu. I'm the principal planner for the Santa Clara Roads and Airports Department. And we want to welcome you for attending and sharing your evening with us tonight to go over the Foothill Expressway Multimodal Feasibility Study. I just want to give a little bit of a background on what this study is and where it came from. So as part of our active transportation plan that was done and adopted yesterday by the Board of Supervisors, and some recommendations of that plan were that we would do consequential feasibility studies as part of the in-depth analysis of the recommendations that was done as part of the high-level master planning analysis that was done at the ATP. And one of the recommendations of that analysis was that the expressways would have class 1 shared use paths. And this multimodal feasibility study for Foothill, which is the first one that we started through some Measure B grant, we would like to kind of analyze the different opportunities and possibilities that can be done as part of this project. And to do that, we hired our consultant Kimberly Horn to help us develop the design. And tonight and yesterday we had a community meeting at the Los Altos Hills Community Center. There was good feedback there, and we want to welcome you to give us your feedback also here so that we can shape and inform the feasibility. We don't have alternatives yet developed. We're just collecting high-level feedbacks on what you want to see, what your pain points are, and also what in-depth analysis you want to be done as part of this process. So with that, I will lead it to the Kimberly Horn team. And tonight, my deputy director, Chris Lam, couldn't be here because we had a conflict with another community meeting for another project. So I just want to flag that out, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ben. Yes, the county is busy doing a lot of public engagement on a lot of different projects. As Ben mentioned, this is the second of 2 meetings. We had an in-person meeting last night, so we are pleased that if you couldn't join us last night in person, that you are with us tonight. So we will go to the next slide so we can introduce our team. As Ben mentioned, Chris is off tonight, but Ben is representing the county. And then you have Adam Dinkberg, who will be giving the presentation. Vanessa Pierce is also the deputy project manager, and she's going to be helping answer questions in the chat. My teammate, Marissa Sanchez, here also on camera, is going to be taking notes, and my name is Brandy Childress. I'll be the facilitator for the evening. Next slide with the instructions to participate. Because we are in a virtual room, we have the luxury of having questions and answer function here. You can, as the speaker is going through the presentation, please leave your comments or questions, and then at the end of the presentation, we will get to those. If we're not answering them live during the presentation, we can take the questions at the Q&A portion. And you can also, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand and I will ask you to come off mute, and you'll have a minute or two to give us your comments or questions and we can answer those live. Also, As you can tell, that we have Spanish interpretation on the slides. So if there is anyone who needs to speak to us or leave a question in Spanish, my peer Marissa can ask you to come off of mute and ask those questions, or we can answer them in the chat. Marissa, could you also say that in Spanish?
Sí, como nota para aquellos asistentes que necesiten traducción en español, también tenemos el texto disponible aquí en la presentación, pero adicionalmente si desean incluir sus preguntas, lo pueden agregar en la cajita de QA o agregar aquí, levantar la mano para hacer la pregunta y después nosotros les contestaremos y responderemos en la sección apropiada. Gracias.
Thank you, Marissa. All right, next slide. Let's get into the agenda. So we're going to go into the project overview. Adam will talk about the current corridor conditions and the next steps, and really how you can get involved, provide input through some surveys and the things that you're doing tonight, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So without further ado, let's get into the project overview. Adam.
Yes, thank you, Brandy, and good evening, everybody. Adam Dankberg with Kimwe Horn, work for the consultant team that was hired by the county for this project. As Ben mentioned, the county yesterday just adopted its active transportation plan. That plan, which is a multi-year, very significant effort the county undertook, identified a number of recommendations to county-operated roadways throughout Santa Clara County to improve walking and biking facilities. One of the recommendations included in that plan is to provide a Class 1 mixed-use path along Foothill Expressway and Junipero Serra Boulevard. The recommendation is for the full length of that corridor from the San Mateo County line at the far northern section down the 10 miles to where the expressway ends, south 280 in Cupertino. So our study is building off of that initial recommendation to do a much deeper dive into this corridor to identify what can fit, what some potential solutions are, looking at both the specific Class 1 recommendation as well as other opportunities to improve walking and biking in this corridor. This recommendation in the active transportation plan was rated as a highest priority, so the highest, most critical tier of improvements. And so that's why the county very quickly moved from that transportation plan into this project where we are looking at what can actually be done to advance improvements here. As I mentioned, the project corridor that we are studying is the full length of Foothill Expressway and Junipero Serra Boulevard in Santa Clara County, extending from Alpine Road and the Alpine Trail and the county line there, down through Stanford Lands, City of Palo Alto, Los Altos Hills, and then ending just into Cupertino south of 280. So we'll be looking at that entire segment. In terms of what this project is, it is a study. So there is not money yet at this time for final design or for construction of any improvements. We certainly haven't identified what the improvements are yet. That is the purpose of this study. So we're starting out by evaluating current conditions, trends, behaviors in the area. We're conducting engagement like tonight and last night, and we have an online survey that we would love for you to participate in. And so we're collecting all that feedback and comparing that with the current conditions to identify what potential solutions there may be to improve walking and biking in this corridor. So we'll develop some alternatives, come back to the community, and then from there, we'll identify a preferred alternative and an implementation plan to advance the project for county pursuing future funding opportunities. So our scope of work takes us through preliminary engineering, and that is it. And then the county will need to find more money for future phases. This current phase is funded by a BTA Measure B grant, so we appreciate their contribution to this effort. This project started very recently within the last couple of months. We've been collecting some existing data. We did a walk audit out in the field with staff from the many agencies that lie along this corridor, as well as a number of county departments. And then we are conducting outreach round 1 right now. That's still that first dot on the screen on the left. So we're in outreach round 1. From there, over the course of the summer, prior to the next community engagement round, we'll be developing corridor plan alternatives and doing some initial analysis of them. Then we'll come back to the community with those alternatives in round 2, which is planned for the fall. And then after community engagement round 2, that's when we'll identify a preferred alternative and advance that initial engineering and develop cost estimates, and then prepare the final study that will take to the board. So this project is anticipated to take a little over a year, so about 15 months or so. So we're still in the very early stages. Now switching gears a little bit, talking about the corridor. So just to make sure everybody's on a level playing field in terms of understanding bicycle facilities and what's out there today, there are 4 types of bicycle facilities. The first 2 are shown here on this slide, and you can see on the map on the right, this is from the Active Transportation Plan. This shows the network of bicycle facilities, both on Foothill Expressway and Junipero Serra, which has the black outline on it, as well as surrounding streets. So the first type of bicycle facility is a mixed-use path. That can include a separated pathway adjacent to a roadway. It can include a trail. And a mixed-use path generally can accommodate both cyclists and pedestrians in the same space, and it's generally 2-way. So both directions of travel are provided. There's a variety of ways of signing and striping it, but that generally is that kind of separated pathway that is separated from vehicles. Class 2 is more your typical bike lane. Portions of the corridor, particularly in the Palo Alto area, have Class 2 bike lanes. These can have a paint separation from vehicles, or it can just be a single stripe that separates the bike lane from vehicles, but it's a dedicated space for cyclists, but without any sort of vertical protection or anything like that to separate cars and cyclists. So now looking at the next slide, continuing on, Class 3 is a bicycle route. So this is bicycles are allowed, but there's no dedicated space specifically for cyclists. So bicyclists would share the street with motor vehicles, and the remainder of Foothill Expressway is considered a bicycle route. There are shoulders, but they aren't marked as bike lanes, and there are certain portions where the cyclist would need to share with the traffic lane. And then Class 4 is a bicycle-only facility, so it's different than a Class 1, but it is separated from vehicles. So it can be separated by bollards or concrete medians, or it can be raised to curb height. There's different ways of separating it, but the general idea is that there is some sort of separation for the bicycle lanes from vehicles. And these can be either 1-way or 2-way, and there are not currently any Class 4 facilities on Foothill Expressway or Junipero Serra. So we have collected some data that the county had already previously assembled as part of the Active Transportation Plan and other work that they have going on that looks at counts of walking and biking activity at intersections along Foothill Expressway. These are total number of walking and biking, people walking and biking at these intersections. We note that this is PM weekday data. We understand that weekend patterns are different, certainly with more cyclists anecdotally is what we've heard. And we'll be collecting some new data as part of this project yet, but have not yet done so. But this does show that there's quite a bit of pedestrian and bicycle activity, either crossing Foothill Expressway or along Foothill Expressway, with the highest location, highest volume location being at Arrastradero Road. So next we wanted to walk through the corridor just to kind of inform what we've learned so far about the existing corridor configuration and some of the key areas, challenge areas that we are aware of. And as I mentioned, we had been out there and observed the corridor to identify a few of the initial findings, and we'll pair that with some of the feedback that we get through this process. So the far northern segment, this is north of Page Mill Road. A few things stuck out to us. One is that we did observe people, pedestrians or runners in the bicycle lane on the shoulders of the roadway, running up and down the corridor. This segment is unique in that it has 1 lane in each direction with no medians. The rest of it is a wider configuration. There are limited crossings of the corridor of Junipero Serra, and those are mostly limited intersections, and even at intersections, there are some crossings that are missing or not provided. There were some recent traffic calming measures installed between Campus Drive and Stanford Avenue that added medians and these chicanes that move the roadway around to reduce traffic speeds. And then we do note that there is the Alpine Path, the Alpine Trail at the far northern end in San Mateo County. Now moving one segment to the south, between Page Mill and Arrastradero, this corridor does widen out a little bit more. There are marked bicycle lanes in this segment. There are some really challenging intersections, and these exist at several locations in the corridor where there isn't just Foothill Expressway and the cross street, but there are these frontage roadways that intersect the cross streets really close to Foothill Expressway. So you end up with these really complex intersections with a lot of vehicle and pedestrian bicycle movements in all sorts of different directions. That causes challenges for navigating those intersections and particularly challenging for pedestrians and cyclists. So we do note the Arrastradero Road, Miranda Avenue intersection is certainly one of the most challenging, particularly with the proximity to Gunn High School nearby. Hillview Avenue is another challenging intersection in this segment. And we do recognize that this project is not just about Foothill Expressway, but it's really about creating a connected bicycle and pedestrian network, both across Foothill and through that entire area. And so we recognize that Palo Alto is currently updating its bicycle and pedestrian planning, and we'll be incorporating our work with that ongoing planning effort. All right, next segment down is between Rastradero and North San Antonio Road. This is through downtown Los Altos area, and there's definitely a lot of pedestrian activity in crossing Foothill Expressway in this area, and a lot of interest in improving the safety and comfort of those crossings. One thing that's not specifically unique to this area, but there are a number of intersections with this condition in this area, is the provision of right turn slip lanes. So these are lanes that are separated from with a pork chop or some sort of raised island from through lanes that allow for higher speed turns generally onto or off of the expressway. And so this type of configuration works okay for traffic, but does have a lot of safety challenges for drivers, but also for walkers and cyclists as well. And so this is something that we can focus on trying to improve and address as part of this project. Between San Antonio Road and Homestead Road, there's a couple unique conditions, one being at the A Street interchange there, where there's on and off ramps in a more typical like freeway type configuration that results in high speed weave movements between cyclists and vehicles there. Some additional complex intersections at Springer Road and Magdalena Avenue. There are some intersections that have received recent improvements, such as Grant Road and St. Joseph Avenue, where some additional striping and crosswalk improvements were installed. This location also does provide access to Rancho San Antonio County Park and the Open Space Preserve, which there are a couple of those access points that do, again, increase the amount of pedestrian walking activity in those locations. We also want to recognize the Homestead Road project that VTA and the county have been working on with the cities along the Homestead Road corridor. That project is not yet completed and is still advancing. And so we are recognizing that that has some very specific improvements around that Homestead Road intersection. And then finally, the most southern segment includes the 280 interchange. And this interchange is certainly challenging for pedestrians and cyclists. There are no bike lanes marked here. There are high-speed ramps for vehicles entering and exiting the freeway. And it is challenging to cross those vehicle weave movements. There is a portion of this corridor that does have a parallel path. You can see in the little image on the top there, but it is not particularly visible and it's not accessible. So it is, while it's one of the few locations where there actually is a pedestrian type facility near the corridor, it's not really an optimal one. And we do also want to recognize the access to the open space via Cristo Rey Drive, which is the southern limit of this project. So we have completed collision analysis of this corridor, looking at data between 2020 and 2024 inclusive, so 5 years of collision data. And this is data that is available to us from the state that is collected from local police departments. So we know it's not every collision. There's some discussion last night that there's a fatality that is missing, a bicycle fatality that is not included here. And so we certainly recognize it's not the most complete data set, but it is the most complete data set that we are able to access. So this collision analysis does provide insight into collision hotspots that we can focus on for improvements. You can see that there, as I move forward a slide here, that there were 119 total collisions in this corridor. 15 of those included bicyclist or pedestrian, and 7 of those involved severe injuries or fatalities. Again, this is based on the data that we have available to us. One of those was a cyclist fatality, and the other 6 were severe injuries. So again, these just identify some particular hotspots for us to focus on. So in terms of the potential solutions, while I started with that initial recommendation, that class 1 facility, and that is something that we will be looking at, there are a number of other walking and biking improvements that can be made to this corridor that we'll be looking at as part of this project. So that includes providing new crosswalks where they don't exist today. for example, where there's a leg of an intersection that doesn't have a crosswalk. Improving crosswalks where they do exist today to make pedestrians more visible, reduce vehicle conflict speeds, and just the overall conflict between vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists. Improvements to slow right turn vehicle speeds, like I talked about at the free right turn movements. Looking at modifying intersection operations, particularly some of these more complex intersections, to just reduce the overall number of conflicts or make them more intuitive for all users. Providing dedicated space for cyclists and pedestrians, which could include a shared use path. And then we're certainly open to other ideas and suggestions that we hear from the public. All right, so in terms of next steps, right now we're really focused on collecting as much feedback as we possibly can during this outreach round one around corridor hotspots and potential improvement types and strategies for this corridor. We'll be completing our existing conditions analysis concurrently. And then from that, we'll gather all that input and develop and analyze some initial alternatives for the corridor. Then we'll conduct a second round of outreach where we'll come back to you all with some initial ideas for improvements and get your feedback on those. And then we'll move forward after that with identifying a preferred alternative. And with that, I'll hand it back to Brandy to talk about how you can provide your input.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Right here, you'll see on the screen that we have a QR code that goes directly to the survey that we mentioned. Definitely want to get input. We also want to have you share this with your networks and things. So we have a link to the project website where you can get a lot of more information, but we really want to focus on the survey and getting your responses to that. That is going to close on June 15th. So tell a friend, take the survey. Next slide. Which really gets us into this Q&A portion. Again, we